This is a Fox News alert. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, in tonight for Brett Baer. In the midst of some of the lowest approval ratings of his nearly 5 years in office, President Obama is being advised to take a chainsaw to a big part of the nation's intelligence framework. The just released latest Fox News poll shows the president's approval numbers continue to hover around the 40% mark, a huge drop from 1 year ago. We've got Fox team coverage of the NSA fallout. Catherine Herridge in the Bureau with a look at what the president might do. But we begin with White House correspondent Wendell Goler and why he might do it. Good evening, Wendell.
Good evening, Shannon. The report recommends 46 changes. The president will announce which he accepts next month. And while his aides would tell you poll numbers won't be a factor, he is being advised by some pretty strong political supporters. A day after America's top tech CEOs told the president the NSA's exhaustive data collection threatened the country's dominance of the information technology market, the White House released portions of a review Mr. Obama had ordered, from which he will propose changes in January.
Make sure that we are collecting intelligence, gathering intelligence in a way that serves our security needs in a focused way, and not just because we can, because we have the capacity to do so.
Jay Carney denies the report's release was prompted by Tuesday's meeting, and he denies fugitive Edward Snowden's NSA leaks triggered the president's review. But some critics worried this week that the administration is headed in a direction that will make the country less secure.
I'm also concerned that we will see much more risk aversion from the administration to collecting the intelligence needed to protect the nation.
The recommendations include ending the NSA's storage of Americans' phone records for as long as 5 years and barring the agency from asking companies to build backdoors into their software so the government can access encrypted communications. Cisco's earnings report last month blamed disappointing sales in emerging markets in part on the NSA leaks. And IBM's shareholders last week sued the company, saying it harmed investors by participating in NSA programs. AT&T and Verizon shareholders have demanded they disclose their participation. Some of the tech CEOs criticizing the administration have been vital to Mr. Obama's political fortunes, pumping nearly $8 million into his re-election bid, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Meanwhile, his poll numbers continue to slide. In a Fox poll, a majority no longer believes he's a strong and decisive leader, and fewer people think he's honest and trustworthy than not. Press Secretary Jay Carney blames dysfunctional Washington, which he says is bad news for everyone here.
And they've seen the government shut down. They've seen default threatened. They've seen a terrible rollout of a very important domestic policy initiative and the website.
One series of recommendations would seem to be aimed directly at Edward Snowden. The report recommends classified information be shared only with people who need it, and the use of private for-profit companies to conduct background checks on government workers and contractors should be reduced or phased out altogether. Shannon?
All right, Wendell Goler live from the White House. Thank you very much, Wendell. All right, let's look now at the practical effects of what the president might do with this information. Now, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us tonight. All right, Catherine, good evening. Thank you for joining us to break this down. Let's talk first about phone records, because there's a suggestion now that it would be the companies themselves who house these records.
Well, based on the recommendations, what's being put forward is the idea that the NSA would no longer hold the phone records of Americans, but it would be held either by the phone companies or by a third party in the private sector. But there's a problem here because the former director of national intelligence, Dennis Blair, who's the intelligence chief, he told recently that in 2009 they went to the phone companies and asked them if they would hold these phone records, and they refused. So this idea that there's an easy fix to who's going to house these phone records is just simply not the case.
All right, now what about the issue of essentially spying on foreign leaders? Are they going to make any changes? Are we going to make changes? How's this going to work?
Well, the most controversial case has been the spying or surveillance on the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And what's put forward today is that there would be a kind of balancing test. The intelligence community would ask itself, what's the national security interest, the economic interest, the diplomatic interest? But the problem here is that why are we going to sort of abrogate or give up this tool in the toolbox when we're not necessarily getting the same assurances from those governments as well?
And there are also questions in these recommendations about privacy rights. I mean, we think about those as U.S. citizens, but we're now talking about foreign nationals, potentially.
One of the more interesting recommendations is that they would take the 1974 Privacy Rights Act and extend it from U.S. citizens to non-U.S. citizens. The recommendations are, if there's a criticism, kind of vague. It doesn't indicate whether these are people overseas. But again, the question is, why would we extend these rights to non-U.S. citizens, especially when the National Security Agency's mandate is to collect foreign intelligence overseas?
That's a good question. That's what the NSA is all about. Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, President Obama is taking hits on the handling of his signature health care reform law. 59% of those surveyed in our Fox News polls disapprove of how he's doing on that front. Just 37% approve. 2/3 want the individual mandate, they say, delayed for a year, and fewer than 1 in 3 disagree. A vote of confidence tonight for the economy. The Federal Reserve says it will tighten its financial belt by starting to pull back its $85 billion a month pump up of the economy. The news comes amid a flurry of other mostly positive signs for the country's financial well-being. Here's correspondent Doug McElway.
It is a sea change in the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. The Fed voted to pull back quantitative easing for the first time since it began in November of 2008, gently weaning the fragile U.S. economy from an $85 billion purchase of bonds per month to $75 billion per month starting in January. The move prompted by a stronger economy.
The job market has continued to improve, with the unemployment rate having declined further.
The decision came after the release this morning of November's housing starts. They jumped 22.7%, surging more than at any time since January of 1990.
I think it's too slow for anybody's comfort, but again, the momentum is moving in the right direction. I think if we start to get the policy levers right, we'll start to build a lot of momentum.
But what are the right policy levers? Critics argue 5 years of quantitative easing have done little to stimulate the economy. The Wall Street Journal reports today that the ultra-low interest rates and bond-buying campaigns by the Fed and other Western central banks have, contrary to expectations, spawned little inflation, instead raising the risk of deflation, falling prices. Another reason for the Fed's move today.
The committee recognizes that inflation persistently below its objective could pose risks to economic performance.
The decision to pull back quantitative easing now moves the Fed and the economy into uncharted waters.
I think once you've begun it and once you're in far, it becomes very hard to back out.
What happens now that the Fed is backing out?
The risk is that you create another boom, you overextend credit. We have already, I'm quite certain, created a lot of interest rate risk in the entire financial system.
Bernanke, who leaves his post as Fed chairman at the end of January to be replaced by Janet Yellen, the Fed's vice chair, indicated today's move is not inflexible. Further infusions or withdrawals of bond buying remain at hand.
We intend to maintain a highly accommodative policy.
Today's move is likely to lead to higher long-term interest rates for individuals and businesses. But to cushion the impact, the Fed left intact a key short-term interest rate to near 0%, and it plans to hold that rate well past the time when unemployment falls below 6.5%. Shannon?
Doug, thank you very much. Well, stocks surged on this news. The Dow finished ahead 293 for a record close. The S&P 500 was up 30 for another record close. NASDAQ gained 46. All right, let's get some analysis of the Fed move and the reaction from Melissa Francis in New York. She is host of Money with Melissa Francis, weekdays at 5 p.m. on Fox Business Network. All right, good evening, Melissa. Tell us, why did the market jump on this Fed news?
Well, initially it dipped and then it really took off because what investors saw was that the Fed is easing. They're getting out, but very slowly. They're only taking $10 billion off the table per month. I mean, that's pocket change for them. And they're keeping interest rates, long-term interest rates, low for a while. So it shows a slight taper and not as much as the market had feared.
All right. And what does this overall tell us about the economy?
It says the economy is getting better, but slowly. I mean, there was a lot of talk in that story that came before me about the lack of inflation. That is actually worrisome. I mean, you want some inflation. It shows that money is getting traction. You want wage inflation. You want people's wages to go higher so they can buy more things. It's surprising that we haven't seen more inflation. It's a little worrisome. So the economy is getting better, but it's not as strong as they would like.
All right, so how does all of that information then match up with the positive housing numbers that we got today?
The housing starts were really positive. I mean, up 22% new home starts versus last month, especially single-family homes. We're at a 6.5-year high. It's really good. It means a lot of the inventory is moving through the market. The only downside is you have to wonder, is it another bubble created by the Fed and the low interest rates that they have put out there? That is a concern.
All right, Melissa Francis, great to see you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Up next, an international incident over a not very diplomatic strip search. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Boston with the court appearance of that Harvard student accused of making the bomb threats that forced the evacuations of 4 buildings Monday. Police say he did it to get out of a final exam. Fox 5 in Atlanta on news that one of the 2 winners of last night's Mega Millions jackpot lives in nearby Stone Mountain. The woman will get half the prize of around $636 million. And this is a live look at foggy San Francisco. Tough to see there from our Fox affiliate KTVU. The big story there tonight, the other winning lottery ticket sold just down the road in San Jose. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. From Special Reports, we'll be right back.